It was. Welcome and a very pleasant good afternoon to you wherever you may be. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Tomahawk Talk on WVFS Tallahassee, the voice of Florida State. My name is Chris Camacho, and I'll be your host this evening from the best seat in the house here at V89, alongside a very talented panel to give you the best and hottest takes on sports radio this side of FSU's campus. And we're so glad to have you here with us today. I'm excited to be back hosting the show today. Of course, this wouldn't be possible without the gracious step down of Nicholas Carlisle. Thank you again, buddy, for giving me another shot here. Nick.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a very. You're one of our favorite baseball fans here at the station.
Man,
a very
I'm about the
very
biggest
avid
baseball fan that you can find.
Right, of
anywhere.
course. And it was a big baseball weekend for you. About, what did we say, 15, 16 hours of baseball for you?
Chris, I have done the math. I have done all the calculations, and we have maxed out at about 15 hours of constant baseball.
Is that right?
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, I think I am covered for about the rest of the year, maybe 2 years out.
Little hard as a sports journalist, don't you think?
Well, it's not exactly my choice, is it?
Well, that's true. That is very true. Brett Rutherford returns to the show, making his hat trick appearance and a star defender for the IM soccer team, not last place.
Listen, it was a great night for IM Soccer last night. Our good friend Tyler here at the station may have not had the best time as we went up against his team, put 11 goals past him. But it was all in good fun. Hope Tyler will forgive me in due time.
As he flips a certain finger.
No, fun night last night out of the Recplex.
So, Brett, as a Rays fan, I'm curious where you think, because the Rays, of course, pioneered this idea of an opening pitcher, which is essentially where you have a guy who's typically a relief pitcher, pitching the first 3 innings. Where do you think that's going to go? How do you think that's going to affect the league this coming season?
I mean, it worked perfectly last season. At the beginning, I was a little skeptical, but they sold me on it, and this year I think they're going to keep implementing it and hopefully improve on the 90 wins they pulled off last season.
That'd be great. Absolutely. And, of course, the prodigal daughter makes her return to Tomahawk Talk. Catherine Wright back on the show, as always. Lovely to have you here with us. Kat, the Atlanta Braves all reported to Sarasota today. Very exciting news, of course.
Kissimmee.
Is it Kissimmee?
Worldwide Sports.
Gotcha. Oh, that's right. That would make sense.
But I think they're building a new complex in Sarasota.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, that was right.
Okay. See,
Yeah,
that's
where it
maybe what I read. But of course, you've got guys reporting. They're like the recent National League Rookie of the Year, Ronald Acuna Jr. And after finishing atop the NL East, I'm curious, where do you think they'll finish up this season?
Honestly, I'd love to see them at the top again as a fan, but in
Philly's
terms,
looking scary.
I know, in terms of paper, what I'm looking at, and the trades that have gone on, and free agents, and what's gone on in free agency, for sure think the Phillies and the Mets. I think the Mets are, as long as they stay healthy, I totally think the Mets can take it home.
Can take it home. Oh.
Yeah.
So you're saying there's a -% chance that the Marlins do anything this season?
Oh yeah. What we should, maybe you want to talk about the record? You want to estimate a record
Look,
that they might end up with?
That's not my call to make.
If Gary were here, I think we know what he would say.
In Jeets we trust, and I'm just keeping quiet on it. It's not my forte.
Big show we've got for you today. Of course, we didn't have a show last week. With that being said, that's 2 weeks of Florida State sports to catch up on. However, this past weekend, it was a great time to be a Florida State fan. As if I'm not mistaken, Seminole Athletics went 13-0.
That is correct.
13-0, and that's across baseball, softball, men's and women's basketball, and tennis. A fantastic time here in Tallahassee. We're all celebrating. Of course, Tallahassee itself is a very proud town, very proud to be Florida State Seminoles here. But first, I want to start with our now number 16 men's basketball team, who, and I think in the past 2 weeks, the most significant win we can talk about would be the Louisville win, which was, if I'm not about two Wednesdays ago, really big. I think, if I'm not mistaken, a big morale booster for a team looking to make a strong run. Especially they've faced such a tough schedule, especially this late in the season. And I think it showed in the last 2 wins coming that just happened this past week against Wake Forest and Virginia Tech. 2 very different wins in and of themselves. I want to start with our Wake Forest game. Again, big show, so we're kind of running through this a little bit. But Wake Forest, actually, funny enough, with these last 2 wins, both were won by a deficit of 22 points. The score for Wake Forest was 88-86. Big offensive showing. It said Chris Kumaji. I mean, talk about a big game for a big guy. He scored 20 points and 12 boards. And I'm just curious, considering the production we've seen out of a guy like Fiondu Kabengele, this was a great time for him to rest. Does his production the last 2 games, does that now put him in a discussion of continuing his starting role?
Are we speaking of Kamaji?
Kamaji,
still being
yes.
the starter. Well, I think he's going to be the starter for the rest of the way. Just no matter how you slice it, I think Kabengele just has this spark plug mentality, this spark plug aura around him that really Leonard Hamilton has been taking advantage of all season. And I think it would be a huge mistake for Hamilton to just go ahead and eliminate that. And I don't think that there's an attitude problem with Kabengele coming off the bench. I think at this point in the season, it's no matter whether he's starting, if he has to, or whether he's coming off the bench. I think Kabengele understands what he has, or what he is rather, as a player. I think he understands what he brings to this basketball team. And I think if Chris Kamaji is playing the way that he's been playing the past week or so, I mean, that's all the better for Florida State.
Absolutely. And Brett, you and I were talking before the show, just talking about how I think important these last 2 games were in terms of rest for a guy like Kabengele.
Yeah, no, Leonard Hamilton's been running a deep rotation the entire season. I think the last time I was on the show, I dished out a take saying that if Kabengele wasn't in the starting 5 soon, that I would start doubting Leonard Hamilton's ability to lead this team. But Chris Kumaji and the rest of the team have really proved me wrong. He's really stepped up in these last 2 games. Obviously, the Wake Forest game was probably his best game ever in a Florida State uniform.
Sure.
And given Kabengele the opportunity to rest, still come off the bench, provide a little bit of that energy, has really been a huge boost for this team. Absolutely.
Kat, I spoke earlier about how different these 2 games were against Wake Forest and Georgia Tech, and especially in a guy like PJ Savoy. Against Wake Forest, he was 3 for 4 from beyond the arc, and then just got dead cold against Georgia Tech. If I'm not mistaken, he was 1 for 6. These are two stories of 2 very different PJ Savoys, and I'm just curious what you think. How important is his production from beyond the arc, and just the offensive production in general? How important is that going forward for this team?
Yeah, well, I mean, PJ Savoy, his big nickname in the FSU fan world is 3J Savoy. So I mean, I think his production in the offense is crucial. But to not answer your question, but to go back on the Chris Kumaji and Fiondu Kabengele point, is that Trent Forrest was a big spark for Florida State last season, especially at the end of the season.
Absolutely.
And especially in the postseason. And Leonard Hamilton knows what he's doing. Fiondu is in a similar role, and he's able to pick up the team and put them on his shoulders, and score 18, 20 points a game to lift them over their opponents. So I mean, I your take. Do you take your take back?
I take my take back, and I just want that to be known live on air. I think this team is in a much different place than they were when I gave that take last time I was on the show. I might have been a little more negative on this team then than I am now.
Well, it's a good time right now to be positive on this team, considering the 2 matchups that they have coming up this week in Clemson and UNC. 2 teams that are not going to be easy to get past. You have a team like Clemson who nearly defeated Louisville, again, the team that Florida State beat 2 weeks ago, and it was such a if I'm not mistaken, it was a 1-point loss for Clemson. So close, so competitive, and Clemson has been a team that I think has shown their strength against tough opponents, and Florida State certainly comes into this as a tough opponent, a team to beat. And Florida State's going into South Carolina. It's going to be a big. These are 2 big road games, and I'm just curious, Nick, how do you see Florida State coming out of this?
Well, whenever you travel to the Tar Heels, it's not an easy task to overcome, but there's definitely a lot of momentum with this team right now. I don't think anybody can deny that. I mean, 7 straight ACC victories. That's the longest the streak has been since, I believe, 2012. And just to have this team running on all cylinders like it is. Clemson is a team that I have no I guess worries that Florida State is going to be. Of course, it's possible that'll happen. You talk about the skid that Florida State had after the Duke loss, and those trap games that they ended up falling in. But Clemson is a team that, of course, does show some fight, especially when it's at their, or excuse me, is it? I believe it is at Clemson.
Yeah, it's at the Little John. Yeah.
So Clemson is definitely a team that is hard to beat at home, but they're not the best team out there. I think Florida State just has the danger of overlooking Clemson, and I think that's where the danger potentially in a loss might come. But as I was saying earlier, I don't think that Florida State really is any danger of losing that game past that. But of course, the big game is North Carolina. How is Florida State going to overlook or not overlook Clemson and make sure that they go in?
And the big question is how does UNC come out of this rivalry game? If I'm not mistaken, it's on Wednesday that they play Duke. Obviously, UNC Duke history goes back a long time. Fantastic basketball if you get a chance to watch it. If UNC wins or loses against Duke, that could very well affect their mentality. I'm just curious, how does Florida State approach, from a mental standpoint, this matchup against UNC?
Well, Florida State has seen firsthand what coming off of a game against Duke can do to your team.
Absolutely.
We saw them go to Pittsburgh and drop have a terrible game on the road. Going into this game in Chapel Hill, they've got one game at the Little John against Clemson this week, and then this weekend going up to Chapel Hill to play the Tar Heels. They've got 2 road games. The goal should be for this team to just come out with 1 win. And the way they've played 7 straight wins in the ACC, they've given themselves a little bit of a cushion where if they drop a game against the Tar Heels, it's not the end of the world. It's actually it's okay for this team, especially with their tournament chances moving forward.
Absolutely. Kat, I'm curious, which team is going to show up? Is this going to be more of a defensive game, you think, from Florida State's end, or do the big guns show up and this is just going to be a high-scoring game that those betting on the under are maybe going to regret betting on the under?
What, for Clemson?
For North Carolina.
For North Carolina. I think the Seminoles have a better chance of winning at Clemson, and I think that's where they're gonna get their 1 win needed for this road trip. But I don't know. That's a hard one. That's a toss-up for me.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and as we said, going into Chapel Hill, it's a tough place to play. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a reason they're basketball legends.
There's going to be 20,000 plus people there. I mean, but the advantage is that they are coming off what's going to be an emotionally intense game against Duke, the number 1 team in the nation once again, with the AP poll coming out earlier today. So I think Florida State has the opportunity to take 2 wins on this road trip. I don't think necessarily it'll happen, but there's the chance. I mean, the chance will be there for this team. We've seen them perform on the road at Syracuse, at Georgia Tech. They've overcome those demons that plagued them for the beginning of this season and last season.
I think regardless of what happens against North Carolina, I think the Louisville win from a couple of weeks ago was going to be bigger no matter what. Coming from behind at halftime to beat a Louisville team that was, regardless of recent circumstances, was on a very nice streak of their own. And,
absolutely,
regardless of whatever's going to happen at North Carolina, again, I've said it already, I think Clemson's probably a certain victory. I hope I don't go back to eat my words on that, but,
you just never really know with this team. With a
now
lot
see
of Florida
now
State.
see when on the show before the week with the Louisville and Syracuse games, I was extremely scared of Syracuse, and Florida State ended up blowing that team out by 18 points, I believe, and it was probably one of their more impressive wins on the season, and they went on, and then the Louisville game was later that week, and they went 2-0 on the week, so.
Yeah. So what you're saying is we eat our words a lot on this show.
Well, yeah, but in a positive world, I think that Florida State definitely has all the momentum, and even if they do end up dropping the game against North Carolina, they have so many more impressive wins on their resume that I don't think it's anything to worry about at this point.
So just a real quick round table. I'm curious what our predictions for the record coming out of this week. Excuse me, starting with Nick.
If Duke ends up beating North Carolina, I think Florida State is going to come out of the week 2-0.
I'll take the 1-1 split. We'll pick up the game at the Little John against Clemson and probably drop a close one in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I'll go 1-1 too.
1-1 as well. I'm gonna side with my co-host here. I'm gonna say Florida State comes out of this 2-0. I think it's gonna be a tough battle. I can very well see that UNC game being a come from behind win, keeping it a close game. And with that, of course, on the other side, the other team that plays at the Tucker Center, the women's team, Sue Semrau's team, pulling together a really great win against Pitt. It was a 30-point blowout, 31-point blowout against 32-point blowout against a team against Pitt. However, they did drop a game, if I'm not mistaken, against Clemson.
They did.
Speaking of that Clemson game, though, you have Nikki Akamu with 27 points. I mean, we sound like broken records sometimes. Just the production from Nikki Akamu, from Kaya Gillespie. I think just that offensive presence, even in a loss to Clemson, which is a tough team, but to be able to put up 27 points, which ties her second highest career points scored. Her first was in the season opener against Troy. Nick, I'm just curious, what do the last two games, how does that speak to the endurance of this team?
Well, the endurance, I think it's shown up a little bit more than it has previously in the year. But what I'm really looking at when it comes to the past two games, you're taking a look at the reality of the situation of what this team is. There are going to be some nights when Okomu is going to give all she has. There's going to be some nights when Gillespie gives the team all she has, and it's still not going to be enough. And that's the part of the learning curve, the pushing up the metaphorical boulder up a hill with a young team like this. And Clemson was a trap game on the road that Florida State had to learn from. There's going to be a couple of these losses, especially with a young team every single year. And to your question about the endurance, having a loss like that is going to help more than people think, especially coming back and blowing out a decent Pittsburgh team.
Absolutely. And Kat, so the past two games, Florida State has scored a lot of points coming off of turnovers. If I'm not mistaken, against Pitt, they had 24 points off of 17 turnovers. And against Clemson, 27 points off of... I don't have the number for how many turnovers there were against Clemson. But my point is, how important is it for this young Florida State women's team to be able to capitalize on the mistakes of their opponents?
I mean, I think it's always important, no matter what age you are, to capitalize on those the turnovers and So I think that these freshmen are very, very experienced, and I think mentally experienced. Obviously, they've only been in college basketball for a few months, but I know the SID. He told me a really cool stat. The 4 active freshmen currently were thrown into the fire, and 2 have been starting all year. And the last time they had a freshman class like this was like in 2013, and it was also the winningest senior class in program history. So I mean, this team is destined for history and greatness at Florida State, and I mean, yeah, it'd be awesome if they could always capitalize on other people's mistakes, but they're already accomplishing feats that no one could have ever expected from freshmen that are just... I think, what is it, the entire lineup is different than it was last year, starting lineup?
Florida State losing a lot of senior power, but still, as you said, doing some amazing things in courts across the ACC. And for you, Brett, they're coming up. They have a rivalry matchup this Sunday against the number 14 team in the country in Miami. And I'm just curious, where do you see this team? How do you see them learning from this past week and taking that into Miami?
Yeah, back-to-back wins was something this team hadn't had to deal with at all so far this season until they went at Notre Dame and then at Clemson. But they were able to step it up against Pitt on the weekend, pick up a big win, like we said, 30-plus point victory. To go at Miami, I think it's going to be a real measuring stick for this team and where they're at heading into the postseason ACC tournament, NCAA tournament. I think it's going to be real interesting. I think they've got just as good a chance as anybody to go down there and beat Miami this weekend in Coral Gables. I think this game is as much of a toss-up as it gets.
Just if you take a look at the rest of the schedule for the Seminoles anyways, you talk about the rivalry game against Miami, and then next they play number 18, currently ranked number 18 Syracuse. And just taking a look at the schedule right now, Chris, I'm taking a long look and thinking about the prowess of those teams. That's about as good of an entrance into an ACC tournament and to an NCAA tournament as you could possibly have. Now, it's not, facing the top teams in the entire country, but it's definitely not facing any pushovers. So that's exactly what you want when you're going into a tournament like Atmosphere where every single game is going to be tough. So, you talk about the importance of winning a game on the road against Miami, but I think just the fact that there are those two top 25 teams back-to-back, that's really just in favor of this team.
Absolutely. Well, no, and you talk about being thrown into the fire. I mean, if anything, this is a situation where going into the ACC tournament, they're going to be coming out of the frying pan and into an even bigger fire, trying to compete for that ACC title. Big stuff coming up for women's basketball. I do want to move it over, as we like to say here at Florida State, we are a softball school, I think, as last year has shown. Well,
And soccer.
And soccer. Very, very true.
Both share the same complex.
Yes, absolutely.
Something in the water.
If I'm not mistaken, they say that the Seminole soccer softball complex is undefeated, is unconquered, which is great. And
Move the statue over there.
and softball absolutely showed that prowess this past weekend at the St. Petersburg Clearwater Invitational, as they took on 3 top 10, not just top 25, top 10 teams in the country in a huge tournament. If they mercy ruled the number 8 team in the country in LSU with a score of 9-1, just an offensive showcase, outscoring opponents 51-19. 15 of their hits were home runs.
Insane.
It's insane. This team, this is a team to be afraid of. And honestly, because I remember seeing the polls. I think it was the ESPN polls that had Florida State ranked at number 2, and I'm pretty sure Florida State went into this invitational saying, "All right, bet, let's go, let's show the country, and on national television, let's show the country what this team is made of." Nick, what is this team made of?
This team is made out of something that is not of this universe, Chris, because, I mean, if you were having any doubts about any regression for this softball team, any doubts that you had were completely eliminated this weekend with the types of victories that they had. I'm not sure about the schedule of the other top-ranking teams that were there, but just taking a look at Florida State's schedule, 7-4 victory against Oklahoma, mercy ruling LSU, 17-6 against Minnesota, and then, of course, the game last night, a 5-2 win, which I think was probably their most impressive win, even though they did mercy rule the number 18 in the country. But still, that was a game in which Megan King had, I think, a bases-loaded situation, and she worked her way out of it, much thanks to a web gem of a catch by Danny Morgan.
I texted Danny Morgan as soon as it happened. And
wait, you have Danny Morgan's number?
Okay, well, let me. She's in my ethics class.
Ethics.
Okay,
hold on.
This was a congratulatory text.
Hold on, I'm taking over my show.
Journalistic
I'm taking back over. You have Danny Morgan's number, and you're just throwing it out. I just texted her after that happened.
You're so blowing this out of proportion.
Chris gets one chance to host the show. This is what he's going to talk about.
No, I gave her a huge congratulations. I'm sure her phone must have been blowing up. It was on. Was it a SportsCenter top 10 play?
Was it not?
I mean, if
it wasn't,
number 3.
Okay.
According to Luke Fay, it was the number 3 play.
Sports Encyclopedia Luke Fay says it was number 3. So I think I would have thought it would be number 1, but there was a lot of sports this
Either
past
way,
weekend.
very impressive catch. I mean, you know how hard it is to as a former outfielder to be able to rob a home run in such a pressured situation. If had that left the park, it would have been a tie ball game last night.
I don't know what's more shocking, the fact that she made the catch or the fact that you're a former outfielder, Chris. That's some shocking.
I'm glad you caught that, Brett, because I was thinking about that too.
Chris, they put the worst players in outfield.
Yeah, oh my God. Okay, well, primarily a first and third baseman, but I took some time in the outfield. Anyway, why did this show turn on me? I have no clue where.
I know. I'm still here for you, Chris.
Thank you. This is, we should really have Kat on.
More often.
We should have Kat host the show. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Perfect. This just in, hosting next week's show is will be Catherine Wright. Thank you for that. But anyway, bringing it back to this team, I think there's also a huge defensive mentality to this. 19 runs in the span of 6 games. I mean, you're talking roughly 3. You're giving up 3 runs a game, and I think that speaks a lot to the pitching staff on hand. Looking at Megan King's numbers, she has a sub 1 ERA, a .85 ERA. Catherine Sandercock, who was one of the who was a highly touted pitching prospect coming into this season, has a sub 2 ERA. Just huge numbers coming out of this weekend. And Brett, I'm just curious, should batters be afraid of this pitching rotation?
Oh yes. I mean, Florida State softball made it look extremely easy this weekend, but let's not be confused here. This was not easy. They were playing some of the top teams in the nation. Mm-hmm. I think it's really clear that Lonnie Alameda's girls are ready to defend their national championship this year. They are very clearly the number 1 team in the country, and yes, opposing lineups should be very scared.
And Nick, it's interesting. You talked about the other top, looking at the schedules of the other top teams. The only team that was ranked above Florida State was UCLA, and UCLA hasn't played any top 10, any top 25 teams thus far. So, regardless, I think the consensus is Florida State softball, extremely, extremely strong showing, and I think they showed the country just what they're made of. And with that, we're going to take a brief break over here on Tomahawk Talk. Tyler Phillips has your Seminole segment, a time-honored tradition here on the show. And on the other side, we're talking Seminole baseball and some MLB talk, my specialty. I'm very excited. You're listening to WVFS Tallahassee, the voice of Florida State.
The ocean's deep, she knew that much before she had just gonna leave and never come back to you. She'll watch you sleep. No, she never satisfied you. You're gonna weep before you grow. You got to know she had to go ahead and leave you alone. And in her heart, she's gone and on and on and on and on. A deep, dark, homeless ocean sink her to the bottom. When she goes, she hopes you meet a woman who will live those holes that she shot straight through you. But it can't go alone. You may say you can take it when they break your suffering heart, and they seem to believe that when you say you're holding strong. I guess that's what they call moving on. And while he sleeps, he knows he's gonna have to wake up. She will have left him, and day after day, oh, he will pray, he'll plead, he'll dream, he'll clench his little fingers around his blanket bed and flees because he's not there to wake up alone. And in his heart is misery, and on, so endlessly where he goes, he hopes and hopes to meet a woman to fill those holes that she shot straight through him and left him alone. You may say you can take it when they break your suffering heart.
Thanks, Chris. This is Tyler Phillips with your time-honored tradition of Seminole segment. The Florida State Seminoles have had a great weekend for sports, getting a combined 14 wins in 5 different sports. Baseball and softball won a combined 10 games, women's tennis got a big win over the 15th-ranked Hurricanes, and men and women's basketball won both of their games. However, one of the biggest accomplishments for the school this week came on Tuesday when they defended their Mobile Golf Championship tournament. On day 1 of the tournament, sophomore Jonathan Pack led the Seminoles, scoring 11 under par. Pack's 63 in the second round is tied for the 4th lowest single-round score in program history. Pack also scored 62 in the fall of 2018, which is tied for the 2nd lowest in Seminole history, only surpassed by a 61 score by golf alumni Carl DeSarce in 1967. Pack ended up with winning an individual title, which is his 4th on the year. Behind Pack's performance, the Seminoles would take a 5-stroke lead as a team into Day 2, with FSU at 23 under and Louisville at 18 under. Day 2 would eventually get rained out, and the Seminoles would win back-to-back championships in the spring for the past 2 years. FSU head coach Trey Jones said, "I'm proud of the guys for a great round yesterday in the afternoon. Unfortunately, we were disappointed we weren't able to play all 54 holes, and we didn't get to play in some weather. Either way, that's the hand we were dealt, but I'm glad we've gotten off to a good start in the spring." Pack and the Seminoles will attempt to win 3 consecutive tournaments for the first time since winning 4 straight in 2015. The next tournament is in Tallahassee at the Golden Eagles Country Club on February 23rd and 24th, where Pack and the Seminoles will look to defend yet another championship from last year. The Seminoles will play host to 14 teams that include Jacksonville, James Madison, Louisville, Illinois State, Cincinnati, Kansas State, Princeton, West Virginia, Wake Forest, Kentucky, Nicholas State, Troy, and Morehead State. In women's tennis, the Seminoles dominated at home, defeating the number 15 Miami Hurricanes and the unranked Florida A&M Rattlers. In Game 1 on Saturday, the Noles started off rough, losing their first doubles points of the season. Senior Julia Michalski and junior Andrea Garcia were the first doubles loss of the day, losing at a score of 6-0. The Noles tied the doubles points up at 6-3 with a win on Court 3. Miami then bounced back to take Court 1 and a 6-4 win. Despite losing ground in doubles, the Noles bounced back and dominated their in-state rivals, taking 5 of 6 of the first sets in single play. The rain started, and the Noles and Hurricanes were forced indoors. From there, the Noles would take 4 points in singles, giving them a 4-1 lead on the day. Eventually, the Noles would take a 5-1 lead before Opranovic lost to the number 4 player in the country, Estelle Perez, on Court 1. The Noles finished the day with a 5-2 win over the Hurricanes. FSU head coach Jennifer Hyde said, "Today was a really good day for us. We started a little slow in doubles. We were not executing the way we could have, and we were playing a little hesitant, and that was the difference for sure." In Game 2 of Saturday's doubleheader, the Noles faced in-town rival FAMU. The Noles took care of business in doubles, this time winning Court 1 and 3. FSU took the first 5 sets and turned them into 3 single wins. FSU would go on to win 4-1. The number 20 Lady Noles take on the number 24 Lady Gators tomorrow in Gainesville, then come back home on Saturday against the number 4 Duke Blue Devils. The Lady Noles are 8-1 in regular play and 1-0 in the ACC. This concludes your Seminole segment. My name is Tyler Phillips. Now back over to Chris and Nick with Tomahawk Talk.
Tyler Phillips, ladies and gentlemen, with your Seminole segment, the time-honored tradition here on Tomahawk Talk. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to have you here. On this side of the show, we're talking Seminole baseball, as I mentioned, and what a weekend it was. A lot of emotions, 4 very different games.
15 hours worth.
15 hours
You
worth
were
of
blessed to
baseball.
watch 15 hours
Yes.
of baseball this weekend.
How
Nick.
dare you not appreciate that, Nick?
Okay. maybe you should text Danny Morgan about it.
Ooh, well, that's softball. So
Two
Anyways,
different sports.
yeah,
I'm not going to
completely
complain
different.
about that. But anyway,
Not complaining.
for the last time in his career, number 11, Mike Martin, stepped out onto the field that bears his name and swept a team in Maine. Against Maine. It was, again, as I mentioned, a very emotional weekend, but there was a lot of good stuff that came out of it. On Friday, history was made in that for the first time in 11's career, he opened the season with a no-hitter, a combined no-hitter. He talked about how Chris Chavez was in the dugout with him, was in the dugout with the team, I should say. And Chris Chavez was the last player for Florida State to throw a no-hitter. It was a great environment to be around. Nick, I'm just curious, what after 15 hours of baseball, what did you take away?
this team, I think the biggest questions heading into this weekend were, one, how is the back end of the rotation going to look? Because of Kyle McMullen was lost this season to surgery to repair his torn labrum, and that we could talk about that a little bit later. But another part of it was okay. So how are the young players going to perform this weekend? And you take a look at the no hitter on Friday night. You take a look at how well these young players, especially Robbie Martin, 5 RBIs in his first game as a Seminole, 9 on the weekend. You just take a look at everything, and everybody just played so well for an opening weekend. Nonetheless, it was really just exciting to watch. As much as I joke about the time that I spent there, all of it was exciting. It was really something to watch. And Mike Martin was saying he never thought he would be talking to us about a no-hitter on opening day. He never thought that was going to be a possibility. And I don't know if anybody believes in omens or not. I don't know how you could see that as a bad omen.
It's a great way to start the season, I'll tell you that much. Brett, you and I were talking about, if I'm not mistaken, you said every batter that had, was it 2 plate appearances?
More than one plate appearance.
More than one plate appearance.
Drew a walk this weekend.
Which
is just an insane statistic. I mean, the main pitchers had a bit of a rough weekend. Could not find the strike zone consistently. But yeah, everyone was getting on base, and it did limit some of the true at-bats for some of the guys in the middle of the Seminoles order, including Reese Albert and Drew Mendoza, who drew a combined 8 walks on the weekend. But they were also able to pick up their hits, and a ton of offense for the Seminoles this weekend.
Ton of offense. And we're talking about the first 3 games at least were 3 very different games, as I mentioned before. You start the weekend off with a no-hitter. The next game, you outscore your opponent 16-3, if I'm not mistaken, an absolute offensive rout. And then the second game of the doubleheader on Saturday is a come-from-behind walk-off victory. Kat, what does this say? You've got defensive dominance, offensive dominance, and resilience, and meaning the ability to overcome challenges. What does that say for a team this early on?
Well, it kind of resembles, I don't want to make too much of a comparison, but it kind of resembles the women's basketball and them being such a young freshman team. Elijah Cabell is a good example. He started the first game. He went, I think he was
0 for 4
yeah,
with
he
a
struck
couple
out
of strikeouts.
3 times and then was hit by a pitch twice.
He was getting an earful from Mike Martin Jr. on the base pass. He did pick up 2 stolen bases, but he was struggling out there a little bit.
As he should. And then he came back and hit a home run the next day. Was more patient at the plate. I think that they have a lot of learning to do. But it's great that Parrish was able to start out the season so dominantly. I know last year Tyler Holton, it was a season-ending elbow injury the first game of the season, so that was really devastating. So for them to be able to start it out with a no-hitter. For the game to end 11-0 for the number 11 ranked Florida State Seminoles, and they came out with a sweep, so
Talk
it was
about
dominant.
And number 11, Mike Martin.
Yeah,
Oh
there it
my Lord!
The metaphors are endless, needless to say. But speaking to more so on the pitching side of things. We've seen the starters. They've done well, with the exception of maybe an Austin Pollock, who, if I'm not, he's got a 12+ ERA. Did not look great for him in the second game of the doubleheader on Saturday. However, what concerns me more so is the back side of the pitching staff, meaning the bullpen. Guys like Jonas Scalaro, who are being put in these tough situations, they're finding that difficult. And Scalaro had troubles last year as well in these tough situations. So I'm curious. Who did we see, again, it's real early, but who did we see maybe struggle, and who can we see as maybe a real staple to the bullpen?
Well, I think Antonio Velez is one to look at. Lefty transfer out of Hillsborough Community College. I actually got the chance to face him in high school. He struck me out pretty easily, and he was pitching with similar ease this weekend against Maine. It'll be really exciting to see how 11 uses him out of the bullpen. I think he's going to play a similar role as Jonas Scalaro did last year, coming out of the bullpen, kind of mixing it up. You got a hard-throwing righty, then you move over to a more of a shifty left-hander. I think Scalaro struggled a little bit on the weekend. He took 34 pitches to get out of his only inning, gave up a run. But I think this Florida State pitching staff is deep. They've got plenty of options. It'll just be a matter of how consistent can those guys in the back end get.
All right. And Kat, who do you see as maybe somebody that is struggling and that you would like to see maybe step up a little more?
I think Austin Pollock is a big red flag. You want that Sunday guy, and you want someone that you can rely on, and he's not really the guy you can rely on. J.C. Flowers, he did really, really well this weekend, but he tends to, start the season pretty well and then kind of tapers off. I understand the injuries have plagued him the past 2 years, but I don't know. I think there's a mental aspect to it, and I think moving him to the bullpen, a 6-out closer, I think that'll help boost his morale. If he can get in some good innings, it could help his bat. It could be like a Shohei Ohtani kind of thing. But I know that's a
Great comp.
But it's a bit of a reach. But you never know. And he's a junior. He's running out of time to impress. So
Speak of JC, and it's funny because you speak to the putting confidence in his bat on Saturday. It was Saturday, right? It was Friday.
It was Friday night.
Yeah, the opening game, and he launches a shot to center field. And what was the word that Mike Martin gave him on the way in?
I believe that word was wow.
That 11 said in his press conference. He said when J.C. Flowers came back to the dugout, I said something to him that I haven't said his entire career, and that was wow. I mean, it really was.
Yeah.
That was his first home run since 2017. You go a year without hitting a home run. He's been up and down at the plate. I think it's absolutely a great start to the season. An interesting comp in Shohei Ohtani. That
I like it though.
You
it's
like
bold.
Rook of the Year.
Rook of the Year. Interesting. Well, and I do want to speak to the youth, and it's interesting to see the way that this lineup was constructed this past weekend. You had 3 back-to-back freshmen. If I'm not mistaken, it was Elijah Cabell who started it off. Meaning in that 3-man set, it went Elijah Cabell, Robbie Martin, and
Nando DeSatis was
no.
shortstop.
He wasn't immediately after.
Oh, in the lineup.
In the lineup.
Okay, we also had Matthew Nelson catching.
Matthew Nelson
was another freshman in there.
Absolutely, and those are 3 freshmen whose bats. Well, Elijah Cabell not so much in the first game. He did have a home run on Saturday, which was great. And that's really what 11 said happened in the offseason and during the fall is when they had that set of scrimmages. Elijah Cabell started off a little shaky, but it's a matter of building that confidence as the season is going to progress. So I'm curious what you guys think. What is the ceiling for these freshmen in this opening week?
Well, if you're talking about Elijah Cabell and he really shook off that bad performance, in just one game, and he really performed for the rest of the weekend. So, if he's having these types of games throughout the rest of the season, I mean, this guy is really talented. I mean, he's got an intimidating amount of power and speed. That combination is pretty rare. It's normally one or the other. Obviously there's a couple of exceptions to the rule, but I mean, he stole second and third. I think it was in the first game on Friday night, and then of course he hit his home run on Saturday, and he had a couple of other near moon shots that were really impressive. And I mean, what more can you say about Robbie Martin? What he was able to do?
9 RBIs, we said.
9 RBIs,
5 in the opener alone.
5 in the opener, and you just I think what Mike Martin said about him really speaks volumes about what kind of player that he is. He's a player with his chip on his shoulder. He was a player that I think, in Mike Martin's words, he was respected but not, heavily recruited. And we're seeing obviously the fruits of a lot of hard work. And I take a look, and I'm just going through the freshmen. And Nando DeSatis, he was a little bit scary. He slid into second, looked like he might have had a bad wrist injury, but he had a wed gem of a play out at shortstop. Or I believe he was at second base in that particular day. But all of these freshmen really had something really, really strong and positive to take home. And the fact that they're playing this well this early, I mean, the ceiling is just, I don't know if there is one.
I think if you want to look at the most complete player in this freshman class, it's Nando DeSatis. I mean, picking up 5 RBIs, hitting 364 on the weekend, and smooth as silk at shortstop the entire weekend. This guy is a 5-tool player, someone that I think could have a really high ceiling. You want to talk about someone that looks like a pro? Nando DeSatis looks like a pro for the Florida State Seminoles.
Well, and that's what 11 had to say about him as well at the press conference on Friday was just. He said, I remember DeSalis made a huge play, I think after it ricocheted off of, I don't remember if it was still Drew Parrish or if it was off of Connor Grady's glove, but he just came in, like you said, smooth as silk, made the play at first to save the no-hitter, essentially, and Mike Martin just said that it was big league. That was a big league play from such a young guy. Very exciting stuff. coming out of Florida State baseball, Florida State softball, Florida State athletics in general, looking real hot. Except for football. This is coming from the Florida State beat. Somebody who's on the Florida State beat. No, it's not looking good.
Sorry. I don't know. We'll see.
We can rewind the recording. And
Right.
post, it's fine.
From the collegiate diamond to the professional diamond, we move on to my favorite topic,
Ayy.
MLB baseball. Today, the players for all 30 teams reported to their respective spring training facilities. I am so excited.
It's the best time of the year.
It's the best time of the year.
Whoa.
Oh, man.
Nick, not as enthusiastic,
Wow. Whoa.
But-
Ooh and ah.
but Brett, you and I we're talking. This is like a what is it? It's like a New Year's Day. It's like a New Year's Day.
Everyone is at the same record. Everyone has their sights set on October. Not everyone will get there, but yeah, no, it's like Christmas morning for baseball fans.
Absolutely, and I'm so excited to see. I mean, of course, spring training games don't necessarily mean anything, but they do give you a good look at the invitees and who's coming up. I remember last year I made a gut comment on Tomahawk Talk that I thought Max Muncy was going to do some big things for the Dodgers, and sure enough, look at him.
Look at him.
Max Muncy was.
You're proud of that one.
I am proud of that one. I'm not
Right,
going to lie.
That's one good take for Chris.
That is
Kamai.
one good take
We
on
can
this
make
show.
it Monkey Tally.
More shade.
Listen, when it comes to baseball, I'd like to think I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. But what I did want to do, again, spring training doesn't necessarily hold any value when it comes to the regular season, and it's way too early to look at who's going to come out on top by the time October rolls around. But I do want to go around the league, and let's take our best shot. Let's take our best shot at who's going to come up top at the top in each division. So I want to start. Why don't we start with the American League? We'll start with the AL East. Brett, who's coming out on top?
Listen, I think this team has probably had the best offseason in all of baseball. The team that finished first in that division last year ended up going on to win the World Series, and they didn't really get any better. And it was hard for them to get better, to be fair to them. But the team I'm talking about right now that I think is going to come out on top in the AL East is the New York Yankees. As much as that pains me to say as a Rays fan, I got the Yankees finishing in first, the Red Sox right behind them, and the Rays will put in another good performance, probably coming in third.
Do they win more than 100 games?
Yeah,
The Rays?
easy. Oh, the Rays? No, the Rays will probably win like 85.
85. Okay. All right. Kat, you were nodding your head.
I
You
was
were shaking your head
I was
there.
expecting the Rays. I was expecting he has his
Listen,
Rays cap on.
I'm gonna be fair. I'm gonna be fair on the show.
Okay, well,
Kat, who you
I
got?
respect that. I have the Red Sox.
The Red Sox.
I think that there's a lot of momentum that comes with winning the World Series. I mean, obviously it's hard to repeat, but enough to push it to win their division once again. I think it's a no-brainer. You got Mookie Betts. I think he's gonna have an incredible season. And they're pitching. I think it's hard to get by, especially if you see the Yankees as much as I do and the Rays, and I don't see those other teams pushing past them.
Nick, buddy, who you got, man?
I would have to say the Red Sox as well, because I think one thing that you see with a lot of championship teams, I say championship World Series winning teams, is that once that title is won, the team kind of seems to dissipate, or at least that's been the trend in the past 3 or 4 years. I take a look at what the Red Sox have gotten back. Steven Pearce immediately comes to mind. He was a gigantic part of their World Series win this past year. MVP, and just thinking about the weapons that they have, the Yankees have been making a splash in free agency, as they are prone to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to mesh together quickly and as well as they think it is. So I take a look at what the Red Sox have retained, and I just really like them to win the AL East this year. I don't think, as much as we've got a bunch of Ray fans in the studio, as much as they might want to hear otherwise, it's going to be a Boston division another year, I think.
The AL East discussion on Tomahawk Talk will go down 3-1 because I have the Yankees taking the AL East. I love what they've done. I'm sorry. Was it 2-2?
Did you split?
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I had the Yankees as well.
I heard you talking up the Red Sox, so I slipped my mind. But the Yankees, yes, I like what the Yankees have done in the offseason, the acquisitions that they've made, of course, re-signing Severino and Sabathia. I believe Sabathia is retiring after this season.
Yeah, this will be his final season.
Yeah, his final season. It'll be good riddance.
I'm kidding. He's a great pitcher, but he's just been plaguing the Rays for forever.
But yes, I see the Yankees coming out on top. American League East, it'll go down 2-2. We'll move on to the AL Central. Indians have typically been been the dominant team the past few years. Brett, who you got?
Yeah, this division is a snooze fest all the way around, except for Cleveland, but they're losing some talent too. I think they'll win the division easily. And as for spots 2 through 4 or 2 through 5 rather, it could go anyway. I mean, a bunch of mediocre teams fill out the rest of the AL Central, but I got Cleveland big.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have Cleveland too. For the Twins, yeah, I think they'll come in second. They've made a few extensions and with their bullpen. But I don't think it'll be enough to take over.
Yeah, I'll go with the trend and say that the Indians as well. They are losing some talent. They are going to be a little bit worse off than they have. But again, there's still a lot of free agents out there. I think somebody needs to help back up Corey Kluber because he's been soloing it. And Trevor Bauer has had his moments here or there. I think of a guy like Dallas Keuchel, if you get him and you bring him in, that's going to really bolster that rotation. But sure. I think with or without Keuchel or a player like him, and no matter where it is on the baseball diamond, I think the Indians still have this division.
Give me the Royal. No, I'm kidding. I think this one goes down unanimous. The Indians just. However, I am curious if we think should the White Sox acquire either a Machado or a Harper, does that change anything? I personally don't think it does, but. No. I think it's an interesting.
They could make a run at a wild card, maybe be one of those teams in contention, but they're still not. There's still no match for the Indians, who've got the likes of Francisco Lindor and Jose Ramirez on their team.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think one player. I mean, Bryce could lift them over any of these guys. I mean, I think Machado. I'm very negative on Machado. A lot of people are,
most people
and
are.
I don't know. Anyway, with Harper, his first half was so rough. So that would always frighten me a little bit, but I would still give him what he wanted. Anyway, that's a different take. But
fair enough.
Anyway.
All right, moving on to the AL West, where things shake up a little bit more so, but I think I know who my champion is. But Brett, who you got?
Yeah, again, I think this one's going to be pretty easily in favor of the Houston Astros. I do have one team that I think is going to have a really great year and take a second place, and that's the Los Angeles Angels. I think they've built together a pretty good team. I think Mike Trout's set for a career year. So I got the Houston winning the division easy, and the Angels coming in second and making push for one of those wild card spots.
I like the Oakland A's.
Oh.
I don't know. Their season last season was very reminiscent of what the Braves kind of did. They were ahead of schedule. I think that they can work on that. I think Billy Beane will continue to put that team together, and I think they'll get better as the season goes on. And especially with the opener, and they're the other team that took on that role. And I think. I don't know. I'm pretty negative on the whole idea of the strategy of it.
We can
but,
talk after the show.
Yeah, okay. But I think the A's could do it.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it short because I know you want to get through all these divisions, Chris, and we're getting a little low on time. But this is an Astros division right now, but this is one of the divisions that I'm taking a look at, and I'm extremely interested in watching because take a look at I think the Rangers, the Angels, and the Athletics are all going to be kind of vying for that spot right behind the Astros, and it's going to be an interesting division this year. And, as I've already said, there are a lot of free agents still at play. If Tony Romo's prediction comes true, which, I haven't doubted Tony Romo yet, Bryce Harper is going to be a Texas Ranger. So
it'd be very interesting to see that happen. But
news,
I think,
folks, I'm kidding.
I'm going to give this one to the Astros as well. When you've got guys like Verlander, Garrett Cole coming back, I mean, just top-notch pitchers, and of course, offensively, when you've got Jose Altuve coming back, it's just they're still a very dangerous team in the West. Running real low on time, so we're just gonna blow through the National League.
Right.
Starting with the NL East. I know this is Kat's favorite. So Kat, why don't we start with you on this one?
So I think the Phillies are going to take it. They have a very hostile environment over in Philadelphia. The Braves, they only acquired Josh Donaldson. That's pretty much all they did, although they do have a lot of returning people that are insane, and
including the National League Rookie of the
Year.
Yeah,
And their pitching prospects and their bullpen might be an issue in their fifth starter. But Yeah, I definitely think the Phillies are going to be it.
Yeah, give me the Braves in first again this year. Brian Snitker's got a great manager. They got a great young core, and then another shock team in the National League. I got the Mets coming in second and going to the wild card game.
Interesting.
The Marlins are not going to be anywhere near the top this year, Chris. No, I like the Braves to be coming first again. I don't think the Phillies are going to land Harper. That's just my personal opinion. That's my hot take. And even though they do have a nice roster, I still like Atlanta's farm system. I still like the pieces that they're returning. They haven't made that big of a splash in free agency. They did get Donaldson. Donaldson's still, I guess, on the downside of his prime, but he's still a valuable asset. So I think the Braves are going to come in first in the NL.
And I'm going to agree with the Braves for the reasons that both Brett and Nick mentioned. I think the NL East is going to be the most dangerous division coming into this season. Moving on to the NL Central.
Yeah, I think the Brewers won this on a tiebreaker last year, and I think they're just good enough to win it outright this year. The Cubs were a little bit stagnant this offseason. Another team to watch out for in that division is the St. Louis Cardinals. Picked up Paul Goldschmidt over the offseason, arguably one of the best hitters in the National League. So I think Cardinals are a team to watch, but give me the Brewers.
Okay, let's just run through this. No explanation.
Brewers.
Brewers.
Give me the Cubs.
Sweet.
Just throwing that
Cubs
in
have
there.
been shaky.
National League West. I'm sorry. I'm going to start this one. Let's go Dodgers.
Dodgers.
Yeah, give me the Dodgers.
Dodgers, but I think the Padres are going to land Harper.
Interesting. Okay. And with that, that's all the time we have tonight on Tomahawk Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a pleasure for Kat, for Brett, and Nick. I'm Chris Camacho. You've been listening to Tomahawk Talk on WVFS Tallahassee, the voice of Florida State.